I want to thank IAMC and their partners for hosting this congressional briefing, and I hope that we will be able to provide not just information about India that is important for the US government as it continues to improve its relations with with India, but also some policy guidelines. Having said all of that, I want to, they say that you can take a fellow out of India, but you can't take India out of the fellow. So after living 30 years in India, I'm at heart a Hyderabadi and an Indian. Samosas, chais, Bollywood is still part of my life. And it really pains me to say the things that I will be saying. So I am trying to see if I can pull up my PowerPoint so you can see what I'm trying to do. What I have done is I've looked at the two reports that have been produced by the US government for 2019 in India. One is the State Department's report on religious freedom, and then also a little bit of the United States Commission on Religious Freedom. And what I have tried to do is identify the different types of discriminatory practices, violence, and bias against Muslims that we see in India today. What is true of Muslims is also true for other minorities, especially Christians and Dalits. It is quite possible that the condition for Dalits might even be worse than that of Muslims in terms of discrimination and violence. But the Dalits, I think, also benefit from some affirmative action policies which are not available to Muslims by and large. So if you look at the types of categories of discrimination that takes place in India, I've categorized them in three boxes. There's what happens in the society, and then those that are state-sponsored. So what happens in society is part of culture. They may or may not violate laws, but they seem to build the background, the socio-cultural background, on the basis of which certain prejudices are then translated into electoral politics and then become public policy when parties like Bharatiya Janata Party or Shiv Sena on the local level win elections. Then the state also passes laws and makes not just laws, but administrative policies which are clearly discriminatory against Muslims. So you see that there is a bias in the society, and then there is a bias from the government level. And then there are things that are in between, which I call state tolerated, which means that they may be illegal, but the state abstains from prosecuting when these violations are committed against Muslims. So for example, assault, violence, murder, burning, lynching, these are all illegal activities. However, when they are perpetrated against Muslims by Hindus, you see that the state is reluctant to act, and that reluctance to act accompanied by the encouragement that is given by politicians who are in power or associated with the party that is in power, Bharatiya Janata Party, then it clearly sends a signal to people who are perpetrating systemized and organized violence against Muslims that it is okay to do so, even though it is illegal. The state will not prosecute you. So that's what I call a state tolerated. The State Department's report does a reasonably good job of essentially highlighting these. And what I have done here is catalog the kind of activities that you can see. And some of them are very, very dangerous and have long-term impact on what's going to happen in India. So these are all taken from the State Department's report, and you can find an example of each one of them listed in that current report. And I'm only looking at the 2019 report, which was published a few months ago. So from the societal perspective, I think some of the most detrimental aspects are the media. The media has become very Islamophobic. Some of the English channels like the Republic channel and some of the Hindi vernacular media, the amount of anti-Muslim tropes that are perpetrated in society essentially fosters a culture of hatred and intolerance towards Muslims. The way the Jamaat-e-Islami issue with regards to COVID-19 was covered in the media, especially in the vernacular media in India, is nothing short of systematic hate, incitement of violence, And all of that leads to various social activities such as anti-Muslim boycotts. People are unwilling to allow Muslims to live in their own neighborhoods. People will voluntarily abstain from selling property to Muslims. They will not even buy bananas from a Muslim vendor. So this kind of eschewing any social economic contact with Muslims indicates that there is a societal anti-Muslim boycott going on, fostered by some of the rhetoric that you see in the media. There are historical prejudice which are revived through Bollywood movies. It is amazing as to how increasingly history is being rewritten through Bollywood movies. And not only that, but this idea that Muslims are foreigners, invaders, and un-Indian is being deeply embedded into the social consciousness of Indians through movies and other television programs. This leads to voluntary segregation. It leads to mobilization of Hindutva sentiment. The state-tolerated activities which are most prominent are those like the cow vigilante lynchings. The people who lynch Muslims publicly are not prosecuted. And in fact, they are even feted by some of the leaders who garland these cow vigilantes, reward them, etc. So there is this low intensity campaign. So there is, it's like saying it's an ongoing state of rioting against Muslims in India perpetually. So it is not as if there is an end and then a riot and then end. There's a low intensity rioting against Muslims going on, which is tolerated by the state. The violence goes up and down, never ends. There are other things like forced conversions of Muslims. There is routine harassment, hate crimes, and also state societal mobilization of Hindutva militias like Bajrang Dal and others, which the state tolerates. The state could apply a lot of the new laws that it has developed with regards to counterterrorism, the ones that are indeed used with regards to Muslims, but never applied to Hindu gangs, literally. And then, of course, the state-sponsored ones, which are very familiar, and some of you have already spoken about it, so I will not dwell upon them too much. What happened in Kashmir and is still going on, the CAA and NRC, the Supreme Court's faith-based decision on Babri Masjid is, to me, a state-sponsored act of discrimination. And Amir was so eloquent in saying that basically what the Supreme Court said is that all evidence points to the fact that this is a mosque. However, we decided that we will make a temple out of it. That's the summary of the 1,000-page judgment. But some of the state-sponsored activities, which are not necessarily laws, but administrative policies, such as the prejudice that is demonstrated in the way the police now conducts itself, in the manner in which it arrests people, it accepts FIRs, it rejects FIRs, and acts upon already submitted reports, is also an indication about how there is a state-sponsored discrimination or state-sponsored Islamophobia. And of course, all of this is as a consequence of the Hindutvaization of the Indian bureaucracies. Why does India really matter to us? So why should we care? I mean, Americans have turned their backs on genocides in Darfur and Rwanda for decades, and so why should we care? There is an occasional statement about what's happening to Uyghurs in China, but not much. The reason why I think we care is because India is the world's biggest democracy, and as long as America is interested still in promoting both democracy at home and abroad, we cannot afford India's democracy to decline. If India's democracy were to completely decay into some kind of majoritarian authoritarian Hindu state, then 1/6 of the world will be outside the scope of democracy. So India is critical to the globalization of democracy. India is the third biggest economy. What goes on in India has a global impact. It's a nuclear power. India also is an inspiration and leader for the developing world. The trends that become valid in India will echo in other parts of South Asia and other parts of the underdeveloping world. So it's important that India leads by example towards democracy, towards pluralism, towards religious tolerance. And then, of course, there are strategic interests such as the Indo-Pacific strategy plus the Quad. The Quad is this new assumption that the entire Indo-Pacific region will be kept free from, with the partnership of India, Japan, Australia, and the United States, the Quad that will keep it And of course, India is going to be a major partner if the US and China enter a Cold War. And finally, the growing power and economic clout of the Indian diaspora. It is important for the US government to ensure that Indian diaspora does not make India a jumping off spot for global hatred. That is, Hindutva hatred should not be spread in Europe and other parts of the world. So what can we do? The State Department does not have any recommendations in its report, even though it does provide an extensive account of the engagement by the US Embassy in Delhi with Indian government. And at least it is reassuring that the Indian Embassy, even under the US Embassy in India, even under the current dispensation, is engaging Indian government systematically and consistently on the issue of human rights. But if you look at the recommendations made by the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, they recommend that India be designated as a country of particular concern. They also demand that we impose targeted sanctions on Indian government agencies. They talk about strengthening the US embassies and consulates' engagement with religious communities, allocate funding to civil society, and request the US Congress to hold hearings. I actually depart significantly from at least in two matters. I do not think that India is at that moment a country that can be clubbed with China or North Korea as a country of particular concern. There are several countries in the world today whose human rights records and religious freedom records are worse than India's. But yes, the quality of religious freedoms and tolerance in India is declining rapidly and significantly. So the trend line in India is of tremendous concern, and we should keep that in mind. So the recommendations that I make instead is, first of all, I disagree with CPC's designations and sanctions on Indian government itself, but I do recommend that that even though it does not deserve to be in the same bracket as China or North Korea, I recommend designating the RSS, the BJP, and the Sangh family as hate groups and groups of particular concern. And I recommend that sanctions against individuals who belong to, support, and finance these organizations. So if there are Indian billionaires who give money to RSS and the BJP and Bajrang Dal and other groups, so should be individually sanctioned and identified. The Congress must continue to hold hearings and make future strategic and military investments in India contingent on the improvement of human rights and situation. We shouldn't be investing billions in the Indian economy and billions of dollars in assisting and improving India's defense infrastructure if it is not also percolating into the civil society and improving India's democratic structure. So I think it is important for the Congress, particularly, to tie any kind of financial relationship and military relationship with India to an improvement in the human rights situation. If it continues to decline as it is today, then the US support and partnership with India should suffer directly. So it is very important for the Congress to send this message. I'm not very sure that the executive branch of the government at this moment in time will be able to do anything as it is focused on elections. But if if Biden were to get elected as president, then it is quite possible that this could be achieved. His current statement on India was very strong, both on Kashmir, on CAA, as well as on religious freedom issues. Finally, I recommend that we blacklist businesses in India who invest and finance RSS and other Sangh hate groups and who promote, I'm not able to see this. And by doing that, what you could do is you could make it difficult for some industrialists who literally bankroll Hindutva politics from being able to invest in the US, buying houses, buying businesses, and improving their financial relationship. So I think the way we control the spread of hate in India is through trying to squeeze partly the financing that goes to this. The other thing is to go back I want to go back to those three categories, and I would like to see the US government invest in each category, which means pressure the US government, Indian government, to eliminate the kind of administrative practices that it is initiating which show bias against Muslims, invest in civil society organizations, demand that the Indian government allow human rights NGOs, religious NGOs that promote freedom of speech, freedom of religion to be supported and funded by, if not civil society in the US, by US government itself. And finally, also to intervene in the cultural trend lines in India. And for that, there will have to be a lot of human-to-human engagement, person-to-person public diplomacy initiatives. So we need to ramp up our public diplomacy initiative with India in order to ensure that the Indian society does not become more hateful.